Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Business of Fun podcast. I am your host, Dave Wakeman. Today's episode is brought to you by my friends at Booking Protect, the global leaders in refund protection. Any listing, any sector, anywhere, Booking Protect has you covered with the world's most comprehensive refund protection product. To find out how you and your organization can partner with Booking Protect to deliver a world-class customer service to your guests, along with a better buying experience, more customization, and peace of mind for ticket purchases when on-sale dates are happening earlier and earlier, visit them at www.bookingprotect.com. Once again, that's www.bookingprotect.com. While you're there, make sure you check out the blog. Currently on the blog, we have a 10-part series of trends that are impacting the live event space. Each piece covers a specific topic. It talks about the challenge, talks how it's manifesting in your business, and then some actions that you can take to mitigate that now. That's also available at bookingprotect.com, and just look for the blog. You'll also be able to find me and Booking Protect CEO Simon Mabb at the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Sydney, Australia on November 14th and 15th. Once again, that's the Ticketing Professionals Conference of Australia in Sydney on the 14th and 15th of November. I'm going to be giving the opening keynote on change and innovation. It's going to be fantastic. Simon is going to be talking about customer service, and we're going to be floating around in the trade show. We're going to be doing all kinds of great stuff. So if you want to connect with me or Simon, make sure you send us an email. Simon.mabb, M-A-B-B, at bookingprotect.com, and I'm Dave at davewakeman.com. As an added bonus, if you go and buy your tickets today to the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Sydney, send me an email, dave at davewakeman.com, and I will do something special for you and your team. It could be a special coaching call. It could be a webinar. It could be anything. It depends on how many tickets you buy and how crazy I feel like getting. You can get those tickets by visiting the website of the conference. It's www.ticketingprofessionals.com.au. I'll give it to you one more time. It's www.ticketingprofessionals.com.au. So get your tickets today. Send me an email, dave@davewakeman.com, and we'll do something special for you. My guest today is Ben Newton from the Melbourne Racing Club. And I wanted to have Ben on mainly because he challenged me, right? He said, I'm in ticket operations. What possibly could your audience learn? And actually, you're going to learn a lot because we actually had a really nice conversation about how his background helps him now in ticket operations. We talked about how he manages change and innovation because that's a big part of the job he does. We talked about a big part of what Ben does now too is he manages external events for the organization. We talk about how he manages processes. We talked about getting people to buy in. We talked about the power of trial and error. We talked about really a lot of stuff, and then at the end we got into some really fun stuff around Australian Baseball League, American baseball, and brands. This one talks about Starbucks. He talks about a friend of the pod, a friend of mine, Jesse Cole from the Savannah Bananas. We even did a little challenge on our favorite brands and logos. So it's a lot of fun. A great episode of the Business of Fun. So without any more from me, let's get to it. I want to welcome my friend Ben Newton from the Melbourne Racing Club to the Business of Fun podcast. Ben, did I say that right?
Yeah, it's pretty close. It's good.
Pretty close. Well done. You'll forgive my dirty American accent.
Absolutely.
Oh man. Hey, so I appreciate you doing this because you told me when we were chatting back and forth about this that you had nothing to talk, or you were worried you would have nothing to talk about because you're in ticket operations now. And I said, don't worry, I will make you look like a superstar. So here we go. First off, and that's all kidding aside, I wanted to have you on because I think that you have a very varied background, and I think that that's one of the things that really adds a great deal of flavor to your career, and I think it probably helps you in the role you you feel now, because I know from my own experience that having a varied background has been very useful, right? There's always new marketing things that I see, but the thing is like the way you can apply things from all over the places, it's interesting, and it gives you different insights. That said, me out of the way, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up being in ticket operations now, and how you pulled all that stuff together to make this possible?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me to begin with. Going back, I mean, I studied film and television at university and did a little bit of work in TV production, video editing, that sort of stuff. So it was sort of a marketing start. From there, moved into graphic design, web design. Worked with a couple of studios, then started my own business. I learned a bit about that, which ended up closing the business down a couple of years later. And obviously, you learned a huge amount from a failed business, obviously. And then once I finished there, I started at the Melbourne Racing Club. So that was as a digital producer, which is looking after all the websites that we had, which started off as about, let's say, 3 or 4 websites. And by the time I'd sort of moved into ticket operations, it'd gotten to about 10 or 11. That's due to having new events and lots of new properties going on. So while I was doing a bit of this digital production stuff, the Melbourne Racing Club decided they wanted to, as part of that diversification strategy, they wanted to bring a ticket business under, I guess, the umbrella of the Melbourne Racing Club. So obviously we've got 3 race courses under the umbrella, and they thought, well, if we can obviously do tickets for ourselves, we can maybe sell tickets for events that come on and hire, do venue hire with those 3 race courses, and then potentially use it similar to becoming like our own ticket tech or ticket master, and sell tickets for events that are not at our venues as well. So that was obviously it's something fairly different for a racing club to take on, but they were diversifying at the time, and they still are. Got a French bakery. We've got a French bakery franchise, I should say. There's 13 family restaurants. There's a few other things going on, which is all quite unusual in the Australian sporting landscape. And as part of that, the push for ticketing, they bought into a business called Ticket Source, which is San Diego based, and that source is in let's say tomato sauce or barbecue sauce, as opposed to the source of all tickets. And what they did was that Ticket Source, they have a white labeled solution. So what they do is it looks like it's us, but obviously the technology behind that and the client support behind that is through Ticket Source. At the time, I was doing digital production websites, and the head of marketing at the time, who was pretty pivotal in bringing about Ticket Source being a part of the Melbourne Racing Club, he said, "Oh, you do websites? Well, I guess you can probably do some online ticketing as well." I said, "Oh, okay, I guess." I've never done anything to do with ticketing in my life, and suddenly I was setting up ticketed events there was no ticketing manager at the time, and just trying to manage that as best I could. So, fast forward a couple of years, that they got in a new ticketing manager for the first time. They left after a few short months, as they weren't really up to what the exact nature of the role was, and I thought, I'll give it a go. I'd never done ticketing before, as I said, and I thought, well, I'd been doing the digital ticketing. I hadn't done a huge amount of the other stuff, but I thought I'll give it a go and see how we go. So I guess one of the reasons why I was fascinated by, I guess, ticket sales and ticket operations is we're running all these events, and you're seeing, I guess, the sales curves and all this sort of stuff, and I'm really fascinated by what helps to create a sold out event, and what are some of the failures we can learn from, what are some of those levers that can be pushed to actually make an event a sold out event, which is obviously, as you know, is a really rare thing to get a sold out event. But I've been really lucky that we've had a couple of sellouts with some of the events we've had. So that's been there's been some failures and there's been some successes. So yeah, learned a lot from all of that, and that's sort of how I am where I am today.
Yeah, and levers to push to create a sellout. That's sort of that's my whole gig. So you summed it
Exactly right.
summed it up in a nutshell. But there's two things that you brought up that I'm pretty interested about. Which is the first is you started a business and you mentioned it in passing, and it's relevant to the talk I'll give in Sydney in November, and it's relevant probably to pretty much everything I think everybody should take away from, not just this podcast, but everything I talk about, which is like you talked about starting the business and then learning more from failure. And I can say from having been involved in a number of businesses that I absolutely learned more from failing than I did from being a success.
Yeah.
I would put 10 times as far as that goes. But the other thing, which I think is probably would be interesting to hear a little bit about, is that when you took over the role of being in charge of ticketing operations, you had really no experience. You had done the digital ticketing, but you hadn't. And when you did that, you really didn't have a background in it. The interesting thing to me is that a lot of times we feel wed to the way things have always been done, and because you didn't have that as a crutch to lean on or something to fall back on, I'd be interested in learning how you went about learning to be a ticket operations person, because you didn't necessarily have a background in it. So you kind of, for good and bad, you didn't have any of the old things you were wed to, but at the same time you had to figure out a lot all in a short period of time. How was your approach to taking on this new role?
It's a good question. To be honest, there's been a lot of trial and error. I mean, I don't have, I guess, the background of working up from becoming, being a junior and having a system, all these systems in place. So, as I said, there was a ticketing manager who started, who was there for about 5 months or so before I became the ticketing manager. And previous to that, there was literally just everyone would sort of do their part. It was just there was no central person with accountability on ticketing. So let's say the marketing would do their part, the IT team would do their part, etc. So there's not really been any systems or process in place that we can really say, oh, it has to be done this way. So, which is it's a bit of a blessing and a curse. So it means you can't come in and just sort of like, oh, yep, this is how it's done. It's literally almost everything's up for question and up for change all the time. We've had new processes, new, I guess, business systems come in the last few years as well. So whether that's, a CRM system and whatnot, along with the changes that Ticket Source have made when they make updates as well. So as far as a process, there's been a lot of uncovering stuff. So let's say there's ticket types that someone might say, oh yeah, we did that 2 years ago, and that's what those things are. And you go, okay, that's great. And you sort of just almost every couple of weeks there's something you go, oh, I didn't know about that, because it was sort of hiding in someone's bucket that they were doing. They've always been doing it for the last 5 years, but they didn't think to tell you about it just because they've been doing it. So it's a really unique situation. I really like the situation in terms of being able to make a difference and also an improvement. And we've got some ways to go, and yeah, I'm really excited about where it's going to go.
Well, let me, and I want to ask this. I don't know exactly if I'm going to ask this the right way, but looking at it from an idea of everybody was doing their part, right, and none of it was kind of under the umbrella of one person kind of managing the entire process. How difficult is it to get people to buy into the change that you're trying to create, to this need for processes and this focus on kind of systemizing some of the things you do?
Well, to begin with, I think there's not a huge amount of pushback, especially when you say, hey, that thing you've been doing for 5 years, it's not really a part of your role, but someone sort of tacked it in there. I'm going to take that off you. They sort of go, oh, thank you. that's the first thing they
well,
say.
That helps. No doubt.
They're quite grateful, but obviously there are times when, we're still working together as they're a stakeholder in what I do, and I'm a bit of stakeholder in what they do. There has been a little bit of pushback. I mean, we're trying to move away from printed tickets or pre-printed tickets with pre-assigned, let's say, barcode ranges to digitized tickets and sort of having more of a one-to-one relationship and with our CRM system, so that we know that if someone buys a ticket, they scan it in, and we can see that they have attended a race day, for instance. There's a lot of work in there, and in terms of a technological piece, but there's also some work we need to do from our operations internally to make that happen. And there's a bit of a debate, I guess, that when it comes to things like our most premium tickets, let's say our corporate suite tickets, or on our largest race days, we have some corporate marquees that these people want to have a really nice box and a really nice ticket, and digitizing that will lose some of that experience. Now, the debate that I've seen is probably more that the person that's actually receiving these tickets is probably let's say, executive assistant, so someone who's not really going to be marketing for us to go, or for them to come back next year anyway. It's going to be up to the person who's above them, or the person who's made that decision to actually go in the first place. So the actual unboxing experience may not actually be happening by the person who's the decision maker. So, as I said, because we're sort of starting not from scratch, but like there's not a huge amount of ticketing experience from this perspective of changing from a non-digital ticketing platform to a ticketing platform, a digital ticketing platform. So that's probably where there's been the major pushback.
Right.
And over the next probably the next year and a year and a half is probably, for me, is a big project about how we digitize a lot of our tickets to save us money, and also to improve our operations, save us time, etc.
Well, you said, you brought up an interesting point too, which is like you're saying, the most premium tickets, they want a nice ticket, they want a nice suite, they want everything. And see, I would probably go that in most cases, those are the people who are least enticed by the nice ticket. I would say it's more of the regular ticket buyer who is more enticed and more likely to have that emotional touch point with the ticket. I know it's not 100% either way. So that's interesting that's like kind of the comments and the feedback you're getting. Okay, so let me ask you then about an overall theme of change and innovation, because a lot of what I'm hearing is that it seems that throughout all these different roles that have kind of been leading up to the role you have now, is that you've become adept and comfortable with changing and change. And to a certain extent, it does sound like a lot like you're leading innovation, and that you have an eye towards that. Do you have sort of a theory of how you manage or deal with change and innovation, or is it or any kind of touchstones or processes that you think through when you're going through a big project or a big change or innovation, like some of the things you've been dealing with?
I think it's probably similar to a lot of other people. You have a discovery phase where you're asking all the necessary stakeholders about what are some of the problems they're facing. What are some of the problems our customers are facing, and that was one of the big things that we're doing with our digitization project. Is we're saying this process here, we're getting people calling up saying, "Where are my tickets?" Because we're actually sending them tickets in the mail, and we're saying that's not a good experience. And it's part of the discovery phase, and then we move to a recommendations phase, and then start to work that through with all the stakeholders, and then through to implementation, and then feedback. So I guess the loop continues. So it's sort of what I work towards. At the moment, we're in a massive discovery phase with our digitization project, as it's at the very beginning of it, and as we go forward, it's going to be really exciting to see what sort of changes we'll be able to make to improve the customer's experience. This is one of it's sort of one of my KPIs. It's not as measurable as such, but to improve how people get in and into our venues and into our events, because we don't want people calling us up and saying, "Oh, hey, I bought this thing, last week. The event is next week. I haven't got my tickets yet. I'm stressing out." And on top of the multiple other benefits of digital ticketing, that's probably some of the main ones.
Well, let me ask you this too, because you gave out, you have a process: discovery, recommendations, implementation, and feedback. How often are you going through that process? Because one challenge a lot of organizations deal with is the fact that, we go, "Oh my God, we've got this point of pain, or we have this big change or innovation we want it to occur in the business." They do it. It becomes successful, but then they just set it and forget it, right? In America, we had this. I think it was Ron Pompey, and he had this rotisserie chicken roaster. And it was set it and forget it. People set it and forget it, right? How do you encourage the process to continue over and over and over again, so that some of those pain points don't just pop up in a different way after a couple of months?
That's a good question. We've actually got a pretty good culture of innovation at the Melbourne Racing Club. There's people obviously always come up with different ideas about ways that they feel they could, things could be improved. As I said, when it comes to events, and we have across our 3 race courses about 70 race days a year. About half of those are ticketed. So there's a lot of feeling of, what can we do to improve ticket sales? And that usually is where some of these ideas flow from. For instance, we had, I was just chatting with our food and beverage manager and about some of the ideas that we could use ticketing to help improve his bottom line. He said, is there any way we could, do bundled ticketing, so sell some food and beverage along with the tickets online? We said, okay, we'll give it a go, and we had a chat with our food and beverage team, which is all internal, so it's not an external caterer, which we're really lucky to have, and we were able to work with Ticket Source and develop a way to put vouchers in there. So if you want to purchase a package that came with 2 free drinks and a bit of food, we could actually process that online, and that's a bit of an innovation that we've been able to do, and that's fairly constant. So it's not a massive project of, I'd say, digitizing all of our tickets. Right. It's just a small innovation, and it's just through constant, stakeholder engagement. So just asking people, what can we do? What are some of the pain points we have? And that's a fairly ongoing thing. So we don't necessarily have a regular, let's say, catch up, but I'm regularly, catching these people in the office and saying, hey, look, is there any way can we use our ticketing platform to make your life easier?
Yeah, and let me ask you this too, because one of the, I guess probably it's helpful, right? Because you get more inputs. But at the same time, it's also probably a bit of a challenge in some regards, is when you're managing the ticketing for external clients, how do you make sure that they embrace that culture of innovation the same way you do internally?
Yeah, that's obviously an interesting one, because you've got people obviously coming from different backgrounds and have different expectations of, let's say, different ticketing platforms and what they were able to do and whatnot. So every ticketing system has its strengths and weaknesses. I'm not going to say that that Ticket Source that covers absolutely everything that we need. And sometimes you got people coming into a process really late in the piece. So I remember that I did a lot of the ticket operations for a racing club in South Australia, which is a different state to where Melbourne is. And I think it was about 2 months before the event. We sort of done some early ticketing work about 8 months prior to the event. There was a bit of radio silence there for about 6 months. We heard that the manager, there's sort of just one staff member who had been let go. And then about 2 months before the event, I got this call saying, can you do these tickets for us? And from this new person I never met before, in a different state. It's a process of having to, I guess, reteach them the software, reteach them how we actually do things to get the best result for them. At the same time, they're running absolutely crazy. You know what I mean? They're 2 months away from this. They're one event they have a year, and they're doing everything, not just tickets, but they're sort of doing everything, and they're coming in pretty cold. So, I try to give them as much hand holding as possible, and when it comes to, I guess, the processes, when it's a once a year thing, processes sometimes can fly out the window a little bit. But I try to make sure we keep on track so that their end goals of, knowing, obviously the basics, and then obviously having as accurate a picture as possible of who's actually coming to their event was achieved. So, yeah, it's a tricky one, that one.
No, well, I mean, most of these things are, right? I mean, everybody, I think if you are on the outside, you look at it and go like, oh my God, how difficult can it be? You've got 10,000 tickets you can sell. and you've got a certain number of people want to buy them, and that's it. It's simple. But on the inside, it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah,
it's a way more complicated.
Exactly
actually.
right.
You're talking about like once a year event, and like the process is being thrown out the door. Oh, absolutely. How many different ways can I say absolutely? That's completely true, because you almost run the risk of like having to relearn everything every year, and that creates a problem. And and I don't know how many of your events are like that, where the people are doing one event a year. But knowing that that's a challenge, even if it's just one person, how do you help them kind of create a backbone, a spine, a sort of an outline, a framework for their event, so that it allows you to not have to be there to walk them through the process every year? Because it slows you down, right? And it doesn't help. It hurts their business. Is that like a process that you've started to think through, or is that something you've been able to put in place? And I'm asking this completely for a selfish reason, because I'm dealing with that currently.
Yeah, look, it's funny because we have, especially with that racing club that I was mentioning over in South Australia. They, I said once a year they have Easter Racing Carnival. There's a Saturday and a Monday, and people aren't there full time throughout the year. They sort of come on. There's only one ongoing employee for the whole year. So skeleton staff, and they're trying to improve things year on year. But what I started from with this year was, I said, here's the report from last year about who comes into your event, when, where they're purchasing from, and this is the sales code, just to help them sort of understand where they're going to be busy, what some of the pain points were as well, and some of the areas that we're going to improve on from the previous year. So that was the start, and then obviously I gave them just a bit of a tutorial on the software, so they could run things as much as possible by themselves. And then we implemented a couple of technical changes that meant that I did have to handhold them a little bit, but it meant that we were able to get some more accurate readings later on in the process. And but as far as having a process for that, we haven't had a huge amount of clients, and as I said, they're very different. So we've had we've got a blues festival, we've had sort of like a millinery fashion show. There's been, and all of them have different requirements. And there's probably, what I usually try to do is just keep things obviously as simple as possible for the person. Just basically say, you just tell me what the information that you've got, and we'll try to slot that into the software and into, I guess, the overall picture of the event. And from there, we know that what the end goal we want to have is just accurate data by the end of it, to say who came, who paid, what was the show rate, what was the what was the different split of all the different types of people that came in, and go from there. So it's an interesting one, because you're working with event staff, and they often, ticketing is only 1/100th of the things that they're working on. So yeah.
Right. In a small event, people are getting, like you said before, even before like you became in charge of ticketing operations, everybody's getting pulled in 5 different directions, because they're not just doing one job, and so they can focus on it. They've got 4 or 5 different jobs that they're focusing on, and it can become overwhelming for people.
Exactly right. You've got to keep it to, I guess, just the task that they need to do. So sometimes it's just having, let's say, a once a week meeting to say, hey, look, these are the 3 things we need to chat about, and just getting those that way they can get it out of their mind and focus on everything else for the week. I find that's a really positive way of doing things. Yeah.
Now, I got 2 more things I want to ask you about because I know that you have to get off to work today, because it's my evening, your morning. One is, I think you said mentioned you were a baseball fan. Is that right?
Yeah, it's only been a fairly recent thing. About 5 years ago, actually, it was about 6 to 7 years ago that I probably not discovered baseball in a way. There's this fantastic graphic design studio that called Brandiose, based in San Diego, that do these crazy promotions and for minor league baseball, and a few of these caught my eye, and I just became obsessed with it. And I'd never picked up a baseball or a baseball bat before. It's not a huge sport in Australia. So there's not a huge amount of clubs around, and it doesn't really get talked about much either. And from there, I ended up joining a local baseball club and playing it. Helping out, on the club committee to the point where I've actually started a new club as well in the area. That's been a lot of fun too. So, if you look back 7 years ago, had no interest in baseball to now absolutely obsessed with the sport. It's been interesting.
Well, what do you think drove that fascination and that obsession with baseball? Because this is interesting, because I know that because we know each other, that baseball struggles a little bit with the attendance here, and they struggle with the attention that they get here. And yet baseball captured your imagination from thousands of miles away. What was it about the game?
There's something about the mixture of what's the word, craziness, lack of seriousness in promotions, and having fun with sport that is very not Australian. So we're very, very serious about our sport in Australia. So sometimes we have our fun things on the side, but when people try to start things that are a bit fun or a bit crazy here, people would sort of talk them down as being, that's too American for us. We're turning into America, as though it's as though it's the worst thing in the world. Even though we have a very European centric way of doing things, so or even English, because that's our heritage. But when I hear about obviously baseball, and I'm a Dodgers fan. I'm fascinated by how they get, the amount of people they get into their stadium for 80 games a year. I find that incredibly fascinating. Obviously all the different promotions and the giveaways and the theme nights and all that sort of stuff that they do, and they do try some of that sort of stuff in Australia. It's hard to know whether it has the same effect. But minor league baseball for me is what drew me into the sport. This is just real local people with real local connection as well. So it wasn't trying to be big market, all this sort of stuff. It's just having a lot of fun, just trying to keep the team at the front of people's minds, which is really effective marketing. And from now, obviously I'm obsessed with things like Jesse Cole and Savannah Bananas.
Yeah, Jesse,
as you guys would say. I'm just obsessed with all of that. So I'm just I find that to be just, in terms of what I want out of sport, I want the sport, but I also want to have a smile on my face. I want to have a few laughs with friends, and that really fits with my my personal, I guess, ethos, I guess.
No, that's interesting. So why would you say that the Australian Baseball League struggled?
Look, it's starting to pick up now. The latest version of the Australian Baseball League, because it has sort of gone under a couple of times. It was started in conjunction with Baseball Australia and Major League Baseball, who held, I think it was a 70% or 75% ownership stake or thereabout. Similar to a lot of things that happen when Americans come to Australia, they sort of they think that what's going to happen in America is going to work in Australia. So, for instance, Starbucks, tried here and they went well for a period, but they've actually pulled out most of their stores because they couldn't make any money. They just didn't underestimate, I think, the Australian taste for coffee, which is known to be around the world as being one of the best. I don't drink coffee personally, but this is the narrative anyway.
So you're telling me that Australian coffee is the best in the world?
That's what people say. I'm not a coffee drinker myself.
This
I
is
think
something
it's disgusting.
I'm glad you brought this up. This is one of my things that I love. It's thank you.
As I said, yes, people found that Starbucks wasn't good enough for their taste, so that's why Starbucks had to leave. Or they're running a much more basic operation than what they used to. And I think what happened when Major League Baseball made it happen, there's a lot of American guys that they brought over, and ticket sales, group sales, all that sort of stuff. And I think that maybe, and I wasn't around for this period, but my feeling is that because they didn't have the local connection, there were people coming from a different country, trying to sell a sport that people think of as American, which actually has a negative stigma, compared to, let's say, having an Australian brand of baseball. or Australian experience, much like Japan has a Japanese experience or whatnot. I have a feeling that maybe that had that caused just led to it being fairly ineffective in terms of ticket sales. So there's plenty of other options, plenty of other reasons I should say behind that. But we now have a lot of private owners within for each franchise of the ABL, and I think they're going to get that right. Actually, I think a few of them are doing pretty well at it. Some of them are actually going down the heavy American route of saying or route. As you guys might say it, of saying this is a really authentic American experience, or some of them are saying, this is just a unique experience. And you can have a hot dog if you want, but otherwise, we're here to celebrate, our Australian form of baseball. So, this is one of the things that I'm most curious about is how can Australian baseball become a really successful part of the Australian landscape, rather than being, sort of 12th, 13th level in popularity of sports in the country.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, because I grew up on baseball. I went to the baseball game. I've been to more baseball games this year than I've been to in a few years. And I think that, I know Jesse. Jesse's fantastic. But the minor league baseball has a sense of fun and levity that is kind of unmatched in most sports.
I think levity is a good word. Yep.
Yeah, I try to use the 50-cent words once a day.
Nice.
But I took my son to see the Durham Bulls play the Indianapolis Indians in Durham on what's become a annual trek to Durham, and it was Marvel night. So like all the guys are like dressed up with Marvel tops on, right, jerseys, and there's superheroes all around, and there's like. In the gift shop, you can buy bobbleheads of like the guys or superheroes dressed up as Durham Bulls players. All these like crazy, great things that are appealing to people. They make it a little bit more fun. They make it, just a little bit more of a show, to use Jesse's term, right? And I think that's a lesson that's not just American. Right, I think that's just it should be a lesson that is used for people no matter what sport or what country they're dealing with, because the truth is that it's not an American thing that people's tastes are changing. It's a change in taste and consumption habits around the world that's been driven by technology and the idea that we all have access to the greatest entertainment ever created at our fingertips. In most cases, because most of us have smartphones. And so I think that we have to just recognize that the world we exist in, somebody might be a purist, right? I love the Premier League. And I love a little bit about the Premier League because it is so traditional in the way that a lot of it goes about. And I like that. But at the same time, I love minor league baseball because we'll use the word again, levity, right? There's like there's a lack of seriousness or self-seriousness about it. And I think that's great, right? There's, and I think you just have to recognize who you are, what the value is that you create, and be willing to like go all in on it, right? And be willing to try things, fail, and adjust, right? Because I think that like the key here that I've heard from you, and that is probably the lesson that I will try to impart when I come to Australia, is that like change isn't like something you can negotiate over. Change just happens, whether or not you want it to or not.
Yeah.
The only thing you can do about change is you can understand that it's going to happen, and you can have a plan for how you're going to take advantage of change. Because I think that's that's the key. Is like you have to be willing to take advantage of the change that's happening in the world. And and so like you're talking about baseball like that, that's really great. And I don't even want to, and I don't want to step on the toes of that part of it, but I do want to ask you about some brands, because I know that you love brands and you love your sports brands. So I want to pop quiz you and tell me who are the three best like branded teams in Australia from your point of view right now.
So let's say logos or sports logos and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, like the stuff you put on your website, which I should say is bennewton.com.au. Let me plug you.
It's been a long time since I've updated that one, but I did a sort of like an AFL, which is Australian rules football logo countdown of sort of where I've ranked them. But I don't know, my favorite my favorite sports brands are generally baseball ones. As I said, the levity side of it just gets me going.
Well, what are your three
But
favorite? I
also,
guess anywhere in the world. I don't want to limit you.
but obviously,
I'll give you my. I'll give you my three. I'll
right,
play fair.
Yeah, okay, go for it.
You go for it. You three. You first.
All right, me first. Okay.
It's my podcast. I get to choose to go last.
Well, I think we all love the timelessness of the New York Yankees cap logo. I think that to me is something that transcends sport. It's that good. The LA Dodgers one is on a similar sort of wavelength, but I'll keep that out of my three. There's been a couple that have just been absolute doozies from the minors, and they're generally I think the Staten Island Pizza Rats.
Oh yeah, the Pizza Rats. Yeah, the Staten Island Yankees. That's right.
Oh, that was fantastic. There's been a few. There's been a few by Brandios. I'm just trying to think of all the ones I've seen. Like some of the ones that get me going. There's like the cross cutters. Are they Williamsport cross cutters or something like that? Which is a guy in like a lumberjack and a lumberjack plaid shirt, with just his beard, and it's just got like this massive 2-man saw behind it. I just love that stuff. The Asheville Tourists. They got the Moon Man. So this guy he's got a moon for a head and a regular body, just with a bat with a knapsack under it. Just all those little details. I just love that. It's probably that's four.
Yeah,
but, I could go on for days. I could go for days.
I'll take those. Right. I'll give you my three favorite right now, and I'll tell you why. The number one I really love, and he was on the podcast recently as Ali Scheuer, but I love the Port Adelaide Power.
Okay. Yep.
The lightning bolt in the hand is awesome.
There's a lot of symbology in that logo.
Yeah,
a lot of symbology. Yeah.
And it reflects history. It's historical, but it really it looks modern at the same time. And I really like the clean modern stuff. Even though the Yankees one's great, and I would throw the Red Sox in there as well. That B is like really, or the C of the Cubs. Those really really stand out. The second one I would point to would be the Miami Heat. I think that the Miami Heat do such a great job with using their logo for merchandise and for promoting the team and kind of creating an identity. I think they do a fantastic job. And then the third one is, of course, my favorite football team, the Tottenham Hotspurs. That crest is just fantastic. It's like classic. It's clean. It's classy. It's it to me, and I'm completely saying this because I follow them. It represents English football to me, or European football, or world football, whatever you would like to call it. It's great. But the list could go on and on. I mean, there's, I love some of the stuff that's like around. I was just in Atlanta, and some of the older stuff that they did with the Atlanta Braves logos. I mean, those were really cool. I obviously I love the classicness of the Alabama Crimson Tide. I mean, obviously I went there.
A little bit biased.
Yeah, of course. Good. I mean, I'm completely biased. Don't let me kid you at all. I mean, the Lakers is a classic. You can't, or the Celtics, right? You can't go wrong with those.
Sure. It's true.
In hockey, the Red Wings is is iconic. The Rangers. There's like so much cool work, right? And it's
true.
And the thing is like it really is. The only comment I'll make about some of the logos is that like if you don't do something unique where that symbolizes this, where you stand out and like people can identify you from around the world, it's a missed opportunity because some of these symbols are the most easily recognizable and most well recognized symbols all over the world. So to miss that opportunity is a real it's a real missed opportunity to.
And do you know what's interesting is that the logos that I mentioned, none of those teams are teams that I support. So it's funny that the teams that I support Buffalo Bills, the St Kilda Saints, the LA Dodgers, the Newcastle Knights in the rugby league. That's where I'm from as a kid. Probably there's only the Buffalo Bills one's an okay one. I think the old ones are better, but the LA Dodgers is probably the only one that I really think is a really fantastic logo. So it's it's not just the logo for why we go for a team. Obviously, there's just so many reasons why we would support a team and get behind one that can be, as I said, leveraged. And actually, I think it's fantastic. Like, obviously, there's experiences you have as a child. There's the experiences you have as an adult. I've only started going for an AFL team about 10 years ago, even though I'm in Victoria. But it's oftentimes the experience of watching these athletes going about it in a particular way that draws you in. So there's so many ways that you can become a sports fan. It's quite different to any other product, which I find really fascinating. Whether it's you might start going for a team when they're going terribly, whereas I can't imagine you start liking Apple when you bought a MacBook Pro and it crashes on you 5 times a day or something like that. It just wouldn't. It's just completely different.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why I love sport.
Well, and the thing is if you play and this really highlights the emotional connection, which is something and the story, right? Which are two things that we can never forget when we're marketing and selling sport. Is that
Absolutely.
You need to tell the story, and that the people aren't buying necessarily logically, they're buying based on emotion. And if you do your job correctly, every hint of your brand and your team and the things you do will trigger an impulse and an emotional wave inside the person you're trying to connect with that will last a lifetime. And that's what that's what these logos symbolize. Even if I talk about the baseball team, I support the Mets.
Great logo. Love the Mets colors.
Great logo, but haven't always been the best team. So,
one of my best friends here is a Mets fan as well. We often give him stick about it. So
yeah, well, you probably can give me stick too. But Ben, man, this is great. Where do people find you on the internet?
Generally, I'm on Twitter at the Ben Newton. There's my website, bennewton.com.au. Obviously on LinkedIn as well, so everyone can ask me questions about whatever, and I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, no, it was great. And, hopefully people will check you out. They'll go check out your power rankings of AFL logos.
If they want. I think there's been a few new ones since then, but absolutely, we'd love to chat about it.
And there's also the great thing. Where you did a 2-part series about the creation of the baseball team is there, and there's some really great stuff there. So I would tell, even though you don't update it as often maybe as I do mine, there's some great stuff there that I think people could learn from it, and I hope people they reach out and connect with you.
That'd be great.
Well, there it was, my conversation with Ben Newton from the Melbourne Racing Club. If you like what I'm doing on the podcast, you'll love my newsletter, The Business of Value, where every Sunday I send you a note directly from me to you to talk about how you can create more value in your business and your organization. You can get that newsletter by sending me an email at my name, dave@davewakeman.com. Put newsletter in the subject line. Also, if you want to find out what I'm up to, lots of stuff coming. I know I've been promising this, but now I'm finally having to do it. Visit my website. It's www.davewakeman.com, where I'm adding a calendar feature. If my tech department ever gets it pulled together completely, which most of the time that means I got to get it pulled together because I'm the holdup here. Where I'm going to talk about some of the stuff I'm going to do in Australia. There is, besides the Ticketing Professionals Conference, but there's another event or two that are coming up that I'll be announcing over the next week or two. So visit www.davewakeman.com, where you can find out what I'm up to. You can find my blog. You can find all kinds of great and entertaining and interesting things that will help you market and sell your business, your tickets, your businesses, your events more effectively. As always, I'd love it if you connect with me. You follow me on Twitter. I'm at David Wakeman. So, as I've been saying now for, I think this is the 78th episode of the podcast, if you know the guy that has the at Dave Wakeman Twitter handle, please have him give it to me. It'd be great. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search my name, Dave Wakeman. You'll see me at the Revenue Architect right there. I also want to remind you that if you love the podcast, maybe you would want to become a subscriber. We're on iTunes. We're on Pocket Cast. I saw we're on Luminary now. We're on all the major podcast platforms. You can subscribe. If you are really digging something, I'd love it if you share it with a colleague, a friend, someone you think might benefit from one of these conversations I'm having. And if you're so inclined, I'd love it if you'd leave a review. All these things add up. They help people find the podcast, and it's a really great way to make sure that I continue to be encouraged to deliver great content like this. As always, I want to thank my friends at Booking Protect, the greatest partners that anybody could ask for. Visit them at www.bookingprotect.com to find out how you and your organization can deliver world-class customer service to your buyers in the case of needing a refund. How you and your organization can create a new stream of revenue, and how you can connect with me and Simon Mabb in Australia at the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Sydney on the 14th and 15th of November. You can get tickets. Both Simon and I will be there by visiting the conference's webpage at www.ticketingprofessionals.com.au. As I've said at the beginning of the podcast, I'll say it again. If you buy your ticket, send me a copy of your receipt or your confirmation to my email address. It's dave@davewakeman.com, and I will do something special for you. I don't know what it is. It depends on how many people from your organization are coming, or how big your team is, or just what kind of mood I'm in. The bigger, the happier, the more excited I am, the more exciting the free gift I'm going to give to you is going to be. It could be a coaching call. It could be a webinar. It could be, I don't know. It could be anything. Who knows? I go crazy sometimes with these things. But make sure you get your tickets to see me and Simon in Australia on the 14th and 15th of November by going to www.ticketingprofessionals.com.au. And before I forget, make sure while you're at the Booking Protect website, looking at how you're going to connect with me and Simon in Australia, or how you're going to partner with Booking Protect, to check out our 10-part series on trends that are impacting the live entertainment and live event industry. Each one of them is going to provide an overview of the challenge that organizations may be facing, or a trend that's going to impact you over the near and long term, and some questions you can ask your organization, some actions you can take to mitigate those challenges. So you'll find that at www.bookingprotect.com, and look for the blog. It's all there. They're going to be coming out over the next 2 or 3 weeks. They're coming out about 1 or 2 a week. So check those out. These trends are going to be extremely helpful. They're things that you really need to pay attention to, and it's a great way to learn about all these things that could be possibly standing in your way. And finally, thanks for listening, and I'll see you again soon. Take it easy.